World This Week, The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. Craig Kapitas is contributing editor to The Daily Beast. How are you?
Doing well, Francois.
Doing well. Good. I see you've got your summer attire.
That's right. It's my Chris Dickey memorial jacket.
Okay. With us as well, Matthias Krupa, Paris correspondent for German weekly Die Zeit. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Welcome.
Still fine.
All right. Alexander Kerry, we like visitors on The World This Week. Alexander Kerry, normally based in the Ukrainian capital, reporter for the Kyiv Independent, co-author of, and we'll talk about it perhaps a little bit later, in French, of Diary of the Ukrainian Resistance, which is soon to be translated, you say.
Yes, but we have to discuss that with the editor.
Okay. Elena Voloshin can sort it out. She's the host of France 24 Scene from Russia column. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
All right. The World This Week, which you can listen to, follow, and like on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other fine streaming services. Finally, they meet for the first time since the Russian invasion, the leaders of Italy, Germany, and France traveling to Kyiv. And while the body language seems straightforward enough between Emmanuel Macron and Volodymyr Zelensky, still pictures can sometimes tell a different story, or we can read whatever we want into them. Ukrainians wary of the French president over his insistence that the West mustn't humiliate Russia. But there were plenty of guarantees that came with that trip, including a solemn pledge to put Ukraine's EU candidacy on a fast-track route. Emmanuel Macron, who also doubled down, he says, on his commitments militarily.
France has always stood by its commitments. Every time I promised you something, it led to a decision. And that was put in place quickly, because, as you know, you need equipment, and you need it quickly. That's why, on top of the 12 César artillery systems already delivered, I have decided to send a further 6 in the coming weeks.
A further 6, that brings the number to 18. Alexander Kerry, of course, within the NATO alliance, the biggest weapons supplier is the United States. They've sent more than 100. Ukrainians say, though, they need 1,000 to counter the Russians.
They say they need 1,000. Basically, they're upping the auction to. They know they will get less, but the point is upping the auction to get at least half of it, or because NATO cannot, of course, give that amount of weapons that fast to Ukraine today, at least not without resuming at least weaponry production.
Is this trip a significant moment in the war?
It is a significant moment in the war. It's a symbolic moment in the war, and especially symbolic after today's declaration of Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, saying that she was approving Ukraine's EU candidacy. So it is a big deal for Ukraine. It is an important moment for Ukraine. Now the question is whether, when it comes to weapons, when they will come and how fast they will come.
Matthias Krupa, that commitment to EU candidacy, it comes with caveats. It's not going to happen overnight. And the 27, because there's a big EU summit next week in Brussels, they're not all yet on the same page.
They are not. No, they are not yet on the same page. And I think this was one of the messages of the 3 or 4, together with the Romanian president, to bring the
That's
other.
right, because Klaus Ioannis joined as well.
Joined the 3 leaders from Italy, Germany, and France. And I think this was one of the reasons they did it now, to bring their fellows in the European Council into line. Beside all the other messages to the Ukraine and to the home public. Yes.
Yeah, and so you have these commitments, the weapons commitments, the EU commitments, the top guns from the EU. Again, in Kyiv on the Thursday, on the Friday, the UK Prime Minister. Second trip for Boris Johnson to the Ukrainian capital since the start of the war. He pledged support, including a plan to train up to 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers every 120 days in an unspecified location outside the country. He also made remarks when it came to commitments that sounded slightly to some like a dig at the EU.
In these circumstances, Volodymyr, I completely understand why you and your people can make no compromise with Putin.
Am I reading too much, Matthias, into those remarks, or is that a bit of a dig at Brussels?
Yeah, it is a bit because not only the German Chancellor, the French President, they are always suspicious to be too conciliant towards the Russian President. We know all these discussions about the remark of Macron, Russia has not to be humiliated. And yes, maybe it is. There is another irony or another paradox in it, because Johnson was the one who left the European Union, and now the Ukraine is pledging for the to become member of the European Union. So I think this is more for the gallery.
It's just show for the gallery, because there's Boris Johnson, who's outside the European Union, as Matthias says, but of course inside NATO, and there are three big players in NATO. We've mentioned the other two, the United States and France, when it comes to weapons.
War hath no fury like a non-combatant. Cannon and musketry, cannon and musketry. This is what Ukraine needs, not talk. All of this talk of weaponry and help should have been there the first week of March. It's not getting there. Why isn't it there? Because they're afraid. They're afraid of Russia. There is this belief that there can be a settlement with Russia. There cannot.
But didn't the tone change on Thursday? There is
I measure tone in war by caliber of bullet and muzzle velocity. There is a fear to call this what it is. World War III. Food supply, globally, hurt. Recession in the United States and Europe. Energy crisis, torture, murder, Holocaust. Ethnic cleansing, am I correct?
You're indeed correct.
I'm right?
There's a genocide.
We have Russians escaping to Dubai. They're not going to London anymore, but they'll take their money down there. I say, my question is,
but Craig, it's happening. It's happening.
What's happening?
This commitment of weapons. There is this.
The checks in the mail, Francois, and I won't use the other line because it's rude. The old rules no longer apply. What do you need to declare a war? In the old days in the United States, you needed the U.S. Congress to declare war. Well, I say disrupt this. Putin is not going anywhere. And I'll leave you with this, and then you can get on with the talk that's very good for academic parlors and perhaps a bar.
But what concretely are you asking for? Does it mean, that all NATO members have marked one clear line? The red line is not to be engaged directly as NATO. So if you are talking about, you can use all the strong words you did. You can speaking about a third world war and all this. What does it change? Or are you pledging for a direct participation of the NATO allies in the war? That would make a difference, of course.
That is above my pay grade. But what is not above my pay grade is having covered numerous wars and having lived and worked in Russia for over a decade. Okay, Vladimir Putin is not going anywhere. Him and his sack of rats are going to be staying there for quite some time. And if there's a belief within NATO and with all the leaders that at some point they can go back and do business with Vladimir Putin.
But that's not what they're talking about.
Well, my friend, they're whistling past the graveyard.
That's not what they're talking about right now. They're
going to be talking about it. You have to beat Russia, Putin's Russia, in Ukraine. Believe me, he will go into the Baltics. You don't think he will? Okay, don't believe me. So go back and talk about having another trip there and say, we're here to help you, pal. We're here to help you. Cannon and musketry, where is it? I don't see it there. Do you?
Not much.
Thank you.
That's enough.
Well, in any case, the reviews are in from Moscow. Russia's former prime minister and former president taking to Twitter. Here's what Dmitry Medvedev had to say. The European, that's translated into French. The European fans of frogs, liverwurst, and spaghetti love visiting Kyiv with zero use. Promise EU membership and old howitzers to Ukraine. Lushed up on Gorilka, which is kind of like Ukrainian vodka or a mix between sometimes it's moonshine,
Like
sometimes
moonshine,
it's
right.
and went home by train like 100 years ago. All is well, yet it won't bring Ukraine closer to peace. The clock's ticking. You went, Elena Voloshin, and dug up what he said on Telegram in Russian. He said, "I'm often asked why my Telegram posts are so direct. I answer, I hate them. They are bastards and degenerates. They want us dead, Russia. And as long as I live, I will do all so they disappear." Is this just a bit of sycophantic bluster, or is this the vibe in Moscow?
Unfortunately, it is, and unexpectedly, Dmitry Medvedev is one of the most vehement broadcasters of the Putin propaganda, which is getting harsher and harsher along the conflict. And now you can, just to join what your guest said, is that now on Russian state TV you can hear more and more of speeches which are just pure hatred speech directed towards just destroying Ukrainians. Even they speak of an idea of Ukrainianity. I don't even know how to say it in English because it's a neologism.
We don't either.
I mean, that's what they say. They just say basically that Ukraine doesn't exist. We have to destroy them, and this is to ensure the survival of Russia. I mean, we can go further to explain what is the core of the speech. It is to say that Russia can only exist within the frames of its empire, and that Moscow has to reign over the white Russians, which are the Belarusians, and the small Russians, which are the Ukrainians. And that's where now we heard Vladimir Putin putting himself into the steps of Peter the Great. As before, he was rather talking about Stalin in a defensive war. Now he's more talking about the heritage of Peter the Great into a conquest war, but a legitimate one. That it's about a conquest to get over, to resize the lost territories. That's the idea. And he said no later than I think it was last week when he visited this exhibition dedicated to Peter the Great, that it was a question of existence for Russia, and it was a fundamental value of Russia to be installed within its territories. And if you want to achieve this goal, then yes, you have to just basically destroy, get rid of Ukraine as a state, and to replace, as they say, the conscience of Ukrainians of being Ukrainians by the one of being Russians. So yes, it's purely a kind of, I don't know, I'm not a jurist, but of a genocidal speech maybe.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was this article of RIA Novosti that leaked. I think it was a few days after the February 24th, which was basically the idea that if Kyiv has been taken, what should we do with Ukraine? And when you read it, it's absolutely terrifying. It is spine-thrilling. It's a whole genocidal program of getting rid of Ukrainian elites. Any Ukrainians that fought for its country is considered Nazi, therefore should be killed, etc., etc., etc. And when you see today some consequences, for example, I mean, there are different consequences, of course, but like the distributing Russian passport or automatically giving Russian nationality to children born in Russian-occupied territories, or deporting, there's not other words than that, Ukrainians towards Russia, towards Far Eastern Russia. These are just the signs of a genocide happening in Ukraine. These are just, all the signs are there. It's just checking all the boxes.
Which brings us back to that Thursday visit. In one train trip, has Europe steeled its resolve over Ukraine? Pool images of that night ride from Poland making the rounds, complete with quips by the German and Italian leaders over the relative size of their sleeping berths.
Much less luxurious. Mine was
you have the
basic.
smaller icon.
It's only his room that's so well. On the other hand, the President of the Union has to have
It's not to do with that. Right.
All right, so Emmanuel Macron got the bigger room.
As always.
He's the French president. he's the French
in
president.
the center of Europe.
Was this the again? We're talking just a moment ago about genocide and ethnic cleansing. Was this the right way to go? Kind of seems reminiscent of a trip on the Orient Express.
Yeah, difficult question. It's, I mean, this was an extraordinary trip in all its senses, and yes, you can discuss about if it is a time for jokes like this, but I would argue they were there. It was the trip which was expected, and they had a message to bring to Kyiv. And I would say let's focus on this and not on the nitty-gritty around.
Yeah, and the Russians at the same time, coincidence, I ask you, curbing natural gas exports to Germany, then to Italy, and now cutting them entirely to France.
No incident at all. And today, the speech from Putin saying the European Union is in decline is no incident neither. So to remember all the struggle about Ukraine started 2013, 2014 with an EU association agreement, not with a NATO question or something like that. And now we are back here, and I think, of course, the candidacy for the EU has no immediate impact on the war, but it has a huge symbolic and it has a huge political impact, and it's not an incident that Putin today reacts like he has reacted.
Elena Volochin?
I think this trip is important because they saw Irpin by their own eyes. I mean, for politicians who just live in a kind of
Irpin is this northern suburb of Kyiv,
very soft and a world of diplomacy and meetings and so on. It's also important, and they see the war they deal with by their own eyes. I mean, just from the point of view of a reporter, you can lose step with the reality if you don't. And the speeches of Emmanuel Macron, when he talked about humiliation, I expect to hear what he will have to say after he saw Irpin with his own eyes. I mean, they never will see as much as journalists or ordinary people going there because they are very, very much protected. But still, you take I heard like the way Scholz was speaking, he was quite impressed just with the amount of destruction that surrounded him. Yeah. So I think this is something that can also play a role in the further decisions.
And will it play on public opinion? That's the question. Not in Ukraine, obviously, but here in France, in Italy, in Germany. Macron this week filmed on trains, helicopters. He was at an arms fair at the beginning of the week, and catching planes. His call on the tarmac of Orly Airport, asking French voters to give his party an outright majority in this Sunday's legislative elections, have the left-wing opposition accusing him of Trumpian optics. Is there the feeling when you come back from Ukraine and you come here in the middle of the race to next Sunday's legislative elections runoff that Ukraine is on people's minds or not at all?
Oh, yes, it is. It is. Actually, it is. It is still in France. And actually, it's quite astonishing, so to speak, because it's been 3 months and I was, well, to be entirely honest, I was getting ready, to have those speeches with, taxis and stuff like that coming back from the airport, the usual, war fatigue, so to speak. But actually, yeah, the war is still in the spirits of people, also because maybe people begin to understand that this war has a direct effect on their lives. It has a direct effect on what they can buy, on the prices of gas and all this, and basically like what they can buy in supermarkets. So the fact that there is a comprehension of this direct correlation, I think it's quite a change compared to other wars that seem far or not really touching French people.
I look, it's 4 days into the war, we're on this set, and we said, Ukraine's going to win the TV war, and here we have our stars up on the screen going on a train. If you're on the front lines in the Donbas, you'd rather see that train full of ammo. Am I right? Of course. So where should Macron be? Let's look at this realistically in this context that we have a war. Where are the Russians now going? They're going to Dubai. They're going to the United Arab Emirates. They're going to Israel. This is where they're doing business. This is where they're being welcomed. Why isn't Macron on a plane to the UAE to say, stop it? You're involved in a war here. Biden's biting the bullet. He's going to see the Saudis. Boy, does he look like a dork, huh? But he's got to do it because that's the real politique here. Not pretty pictures on a train. I'm sorry to repeat myself, ladies and gentlemen. Cannon and musketry wins wars, not PR excursions, making Kyiv like out to be Disneyland.
I take exception. Is it a PR excursion when they give a firm commitment to both militarily and when it comes to this question?
Should I quote Tom Cruise? Show me the money. Show me the weapons. I don't see the weapons. You're there. You've been on the ground. I missed this war. Are the weapons on the ground?
Are
they there?
They're there, but like they're
Who has more bullets and bombs? The Russians or the Ukrainians?
The Russians.
Yeah, there's certainly nothing.
Obviously.
All right, so
Okay.
point taken. There's nothing theoretical or abstract about what Ukrainians are currently experiencing in the face of a relentless pounding in the Donbas, artillery shelling indiscriminately raining on cities like Lysychansk, where one strike killed at least 4 civilians on Thursday. In nearby Severodonetsk, authorities say the bombardments are so relentless there's no let up in the trauma for those taking shelter in basements. Ukrainians say they've even intercepted Russian reconnaissance units plotting moves to next storm the eastern city of Slovyansk. Part of this, Elena Voloshin, is we get impatient in the news cycle. We expect a quick outcome. And Russia right now is gaining ground painfully, but gaining ground.
Yeah, sure. The Donbas, I speak under your control, was very much important and without any compromise. They want to seize the Donbas. They consider that this is their land, that this is the Novorossiya and inherited from the empire. So they also actually consider that all the southern corridor towards Moldavia is their territory. They are already giving, you mentioned that they're already giving passports in Kherson, in Melitopol. They already will put in the train lines from Crimea. This is already de facto an annexation, and they want to seize the whole region with this symbolic city of Slovyansk, which was seized at the very beginning of the conflict, because we have to remember always that the conflict began in 2014, actually, and it was the first city seized by pro-Russians/Russians, because actually it was Russians that manipulated all that. So there you have Slovyansk, Mariupol has been seized, you will have Severodonetsk, Kramatorsk will be the next step, I think, in the progression. So Donbas is without concession, and they want the whole region without any doubt.
They want the whole region, and the advances, those little incremental advances we're seeing by the Russians, it brings us back to the fact that there have been so many pendulum swings since February the 24th. In that book there, which you take part in along with your colleagues from the Kyiv Independent. By the way, one of your colleagues I saw got an interview with Emmanuel Macron or spoke to him.
Yeah, Anna Mironjuk. Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
And when you think back to those opening days of the war, Alexander Kiri, what are your thoughts? Did you then, in those days, did you think it was going to be game over right away? Did you think Ukraine was going to win? Did you think there'd be these swings?
No, honestly, we knew it would be a tough fight for the Russians, mostly because, again, the war started in Slovyansk in 2014. It's been 8 years that those soldiers have been fighting. People who have been training for maybe 3-4 months in Crimea or like in Belgorod around the border of Ukraine were sent at first. And when we listened to some conversation of those soldiers, were saying like, we were just in training and we just were sent, and actually that's a war in front of Ukrainians who have been fighting for 8 years for every matter of their land. So we knew, and there's an article by my esteemed colleague Ilya Ponomarenko, who's quite famous in Ukraine for his tremendous work as a defense reporter, and he explains actually how it's gonna unfold and which unit is gonna go where, and actually that's how it unfolded, because he knew and he knows Ukrainian army,
including that Russian retreat from points north of the
including
capital?
including potential retreat, and including this artillery pounding in northeast Kyiv. Yeah.
All right, that's prescient. The Russians, who right now, again, we've been talking about it throughout this show now, are engaged in this confrontation on two fronts, with the Ukraine, with the West as well. It was the week where Russia's president staged a birthday phone call with his Chinese counterpart. According to the Kremlin, The now 69-year-old Xi Jinping's birthday call included a backing of the legitimacy of Russia's special military operation in Ukraine. But Beijing's readout of the same call only mentions how Xi Jinping pushed all parties to find a, quote, proper settlement to the Ukraine crisis in a responsible manner. Well, whoever you believe, at what hosts bill as the Russian Davos, Vladimir Putin telling the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum this Friday how miserably sanctions have backfired, what with the friends he has in the room.
The economic blitzkrieg from Russia was doomed from the very outset. Incidentally, as is well known, and as we know from practice of recent years, sanctions are a double-edged sword. They can deal comparable, if not greater, damage to the authors and developers of these ideas.
Craig Kapitas, is this bluster to make up for the fact that those sanctions are beginning to bite?
Yeah.
Or does he believe what he's saying?
Oh, he's a sack of hot air. I don't believe a word that comes out of him.
But does he believe it?
I don't know what he believes. All I know is he's blowing wind, as we used to say on the South Side. Where his problem is, and let's be serious for a moment here, because this guy is a professional liar, and we all know this. Where he's got a problem, particularly in the energy market, and I think you've done a show that touched on this, Francois, a few days ago, is getting the spare parts to keep everything going, from automobile factories, energy pipelines, construction of
because there were these turbines that Siemens took to Canada to fix. And the Russians are saying, oh, it's because you didn't give me back my turbines that we're having to reduce the gas flows.
Go cry, Vladdy. I really feel sorry for you. This is where he's going to get hurt. And we don't know, and I haven't probably the CIA and French intelligence might have data on this, but I'd be real curious to talk to one of the real super spooks to see if they think what percentage of those cutbacks of gas and other energy to Europe are a result of Putin being a son of a bitch, or he just doesn't have the equipment anymore to supply it at that level. That's a fascinating question. That's where these sanctions are going to hurt, and it takes a lot of time. So that, as I see it, is the war that's going on, the other war.
A race against time.
It is very well put. It is a race against time.
All right, Russia this week, again, as we said, reducing gas flows to its two biggest customers in Europe, Germany and Italy, cutting the flows completely this Friday to France, and doubling down on that discourse.
The game is over. We are actively fighting against English words in the Russian language. But today, I can use this English expression.
Game is over.
Why is it over? Because demand for raw materials supersedes the demand for currency reserves.
Matthias Krupke, let me ask you, because you heard Alexandre Kyiv coming back from Ukraine to France and finding that the French, they are concerned about what's going on. When you hear the boss of Gazprom using that kind of language, how do Germans feel? Does it steal their resolve against Russia, or are they saying, well, let's call it a day?
That's maybe the crucial question. That's the other race against the time. I mean, the impact you spoke about, the impact on the daily life of people here in France, be it in Germany, be it in other Western European countries. Whom are they taking for guilty? Russia? Or the longer the war goes, the higher the prices will be, their own governments, the US, or the Ukrainians themselves. I mean, this is the other front line. This is the home front for all of the leaders who are involved. And to be honest, I don't know. For the time being, I would say for Germany, and I have the same impression here in France. For the time being, it is still Russia who is taken for guilty, and the support is there. But half a year later, when the prices are I don't know, are again doubled for the for petrol and gas, the situation might be another one. Yes.
Yeah, legislative elections in France happening amid a pre-summer heat wave. So I guess natural gas prices aren't as much a factor, but people are worried about inflation, the price at the pump, and Voloshyn.
What can we say? I mean, it's too late. Everyone knew that Russia is always using the gas as a geopolitical weapon, and Ukrainians are very well aware of it because the gas war have been taking place for years, even before, even since the times of the Orange Revolution. At any stage of the crisis between Russia and Ukraine, they were cutting the gas. So we had this Nord Stream 2 now built into Europe through Germany. So a multi-billion project who is now basically ruined, and the question of the dependence towards the Russian gas has been addressed all over the years without any clear answer from the Europeans, who was just going on within their dependence to Russia. So now we are just paying the price, and we will have to deal with this situation. But I mean, that's a question that should have been solved before.
EU leaders have been going around the world trying to find alternate sources, most recently trying to secure a deal with Egypt and Israel to import liquefied natural gas. And a lot of in the opposition in France, which is doing better than it did 5 years ago in the first round, at least. It's the Green Party candidates that are also making inroads. Alexander Kerry, when you look at the combination of war in Ukraine and the weather, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I believe that it's a bit of a cliche, but in every crisis, there's also room for a solution, and maybe, and I think that's also interesting for certain political class in France to rethink about the French energy mix. I mean, that's the right time to do that. Are we going more nuclear? Are we going? If there's no better time than now, because the problem, and then you were right about this discourse. Whose fault is it? The problem with Russian propaganda is that it tends to permeate quite easily the daily life of all Western Europe and all French people. And when winter will arrive, and when with extreme temperature, like we already know in Ukraine, people will be like, well, now what's happening? We don't have gas anymore, and Russians will be like, well, we told you. That's not our fault. That's because of the sanctions. That's because of the Ukrainians. And they're gonna reverse this speech, because that's basically a strategy. That's a worked on strategy. But it's quite expected. So the problem is France, Western Europe has to solve this issue before winter.
So, by the way, Europe has winter heating season. The United States has summer driving season. And as prices at the pump soar, we can show you these numbers adjusted for inflation out of the United States. That invasion of Ukraine, an aggravating factor in the highest inflation in 4 decades. Craig Kapitas, what are the political consequences? We're having legislative elections. U.S., they're having midterms, I believe, soon.
Yeah. Well, by every poll and every account, the Democrats are going to get clobbered. It's now the base price is $656 a month to finance a car in the United States. You put that on top of the gas prices. It's a really bad situation. It goes back to this global war thing that I was talking about. The recession in the United States is in large part a result of what's going on in Ukraine. You can connect the dots. It's not brain surgery. You don't need to be a Harvard economist.
Really, wouldn't there have been a recession wouldn't there have been economic turmoil in any way when you have a world economy that grinds to a halt and then restarts?
Well, yeah, but yes.
I mean, it puts supply chains out of whack.
Yes, but the war in the Ukraine certainly exacerbated it. The Russians, by holding hostage the energy prices, et cetera. The Saudis playing their little deal with oil. The guys of the Gulf states, they're throwing gasoline on this fire. But the other way you have to look at this is like economies. The magic word in economies is growth, right? Growth. We got to have growth. Well, you got to wonder. GDP declines during a recession, and unemployment rates rise because company lays people off, so you don't have growth, right? Well, some economists are now looking and saying, many people are saying, right, that these old metrics don't work anymore because when you have growth, you're taxing the environment more. And we're saying we have to kind of like cut back. So maybe this is Mother Nature saying, hey, a recession is a good thing. Like, GDP, they like it selling cars, right? But GDP numbers do not take into account the pollution. Coca-Cola, right? Oh, they love it when a lot of Coke sells, but they don't talk about the diabetic health side of that, Let's build a new city. Well, oh my God, what's the carbon footprint? GDP doesn't count that. So you have all of these kind of like economic time bombs happening right now.
Well, let me put the chicken and egg question to Matthias Krupa. Is it the war in Ukraine or is it the inflation? Which goes first?
That's above my pay grade. I'm not. To be honest, I'm not an economist. All I realized is that the inflation in Europe definitely started before the war. I don't deny, and of course, the war has an impact and has a major impact on it. But it was last autumn when the campaign here in France began that Madame Le Pen started speaking about the pouvoir d'achat. So
spending power.
Spending. So it could not only be the war. And back to your question before, the sentiment in Germany, maybe if I dare to make a little joke, before the Germans are looking for are taking the Ukraine into responsibility, they are taking the European Central Bank into, for responsible. So that's another discussion because we are at the point. Will we have another Euro crisis in 2 months or in 3 months? And here in Germany, it has restarted this debate about how is the European Central Bank acting, and are they defending our money, to put it very simply.
Craig Kapidis, on that score, this week saw the biggest hike in rates by the U.S. Federal Reserve since 1994. The European Central Bank is having to deal with the fact that we've had the return of what's called the spread, which is that the bond rates, even though we all share a common currency, the bond rates paid by the Germans are not the same as those in Southern Europe.
A wink is as good as a nod to a blind horse. That's the other way to look at that construct. Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's the knee-jerk reaction. Raise interest rates. Let's raise interest rates, and they're probably going to have to do it 3 more times. It certainly didn't have the proper effect on the markets because a lot of people just cashed out. So, what does it mean? Well, it means if you're retired, you're going to get more bang for your buck because you have money in the bank, blah, blah, blah. If you own your house, if you're starting out, a young guy like yourself, you know what? You're screwed. And that's pretty much.
But you said just before, hang on, you said before that the metrics of the past by which we measure this stuff
precisely
don't work anymore.
Well, see, this is the whole thing because you got the old guys who are still doing the economic number crunching. This is all about sustainability. Because the question is, maybe your generation, doesn't need 2 cars in the garage. Maybe you don't want 2 cars in the garage.
I don't drive, so that's...
Okay. So, but, it goes back to how you construct GDP and what is growth. And if you look at the people who are making economic policy in the United States, they still view everything through the prism of GDP. And even Paul Stiglitz, the great Nobel Prize-winning economist, I said GDP is an inaccurate reflection of what's necessary. So, you were saying this before, even we're talking about the war thing. People's attitudes have to change. So we have to wait and see if they're going to change.
Again, it's this question, Alexander Kerry, about how globalization is entering this new phase, it seems. It's like very different.
Well, I mean, Ukraine is kind of, I wouldn't say off the map when it comes to that, because since 2014, Ukraine is facing quite a different situation when it comes to central banking, because it tried and clean its own system, tried and clean its own economic system. So it kind of operates sort of, I wouldn't say independently, but tries to operate independently because the economy is quite fragile. So it tries to protect itself. So what we see is the direct effect of the war, of course, indeed, and a bit of inflation outside, but these are directly correlated, phenomenon rather than just Ukraine being like completely into this globalization game when it comes to central banking and things like that.
There might even be we can get Putin on another conspiracy theory here if we want. Many people don't know this, but it's actually true. GDP was invented by a Belarusian guy called Simon Kuznets. Okay. Coincidence? I think not.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine precipitating a warming of relations with that other giant oil producer, Saudi Arabia, ahead of next month's visit there by the U.S. president. And we'll see if he's cap in hand. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman announcing a trip next week to Turkey, the return leg of a first sit-down in years with Recep Tayyip Erdogan. These pictures from back in April. MBS, as he's known, who's got the oil and the cash to convince world leaders to turn the page on, say, the assassination of dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in 2018. South Africa's Charles Schwartzel's a fan. Last week, he pocketed the biggest purse in golfing history, $4 million. This at the opening tournament of the Breakaway Live International Series. Fast forward to this week, Phil Mickelson, one of the headline names of the Saudi-sponsored tour, in danger of missing the cut at one of the sports majors, the U.S. Open, in contention for the lead. One of those refusing the allure of Saudi money, Northern Ireland's Rory McIlroy.
My dad said to me a long time ago, once you make your bed, you lie in it. And they've made their bed. So, that's their decision and they have to live with that.
It's Craig Kapitas is again. We're talking about the values, the intergenerational values a moment ago. Is this one of those tales? It's kind of hard to do that when we're talking about a rich man's sport like golf.
Well, yeah. Well, as many people have said, this is sports washing on an industrial scale, the burlesque application of money to take control of something. But see, here's the difference here. You see, the PGA Tour, the Premier League, pick your sport. These are businesses that need to operate at a profit. This Saudi golf tour doesn't have to operate at a profit. It's like Paris Saint-Germain, owned by Middle Eastern potentates. They don't need to make a profit. That's the difference. It's not a business.
Is there a difference between turning a blind eye to Russia's ills for energy purposes and turning a blind eye to Saudi Arabia's ills for energy purposes?
No, if we are speaking about values, no, there's no difference. But as you said, where will be the soccer world champion this year?
Yeah.
In which country?
Well, your fellow countryman.
Where was the last soccer world championship? In Russia.
Yeah. Well, your fellow countryman, Bertolt Brecht, he had the greatest line on this. He said, "Eats first, morals after." Threepenny Opera.
Yeah, and is there any kind of a change again, Alexander Kerry? Your reaction on this story?
Over sport and again, I'm not really well placed to speak about sport and especially when it comes to that. But indeed, it is indeed a problem when you cannot turn a blind eye, I believe, like on energy and having those sports, getting to that kind of business, because that's also where they are and where this money goes. This money doesn't go anywhere else. So yeah, that's definitely something to look at indeed. And when it comes to indeed values, that's problematic today for France, because where are you going to go to get oil and all this? Well, you're going to go to Saudi Arabia. On what's happening in Yemen, I can hardly personally say, living in Ukraine, well, that's a good thing that you're going to get your oil from Saudi Arabia, because you can't have just double standard here.
We won't let you get away without a personal question. You're here, obviously, with the launch of this book, going back to Ukraine. I see, as we see with all these leaders shuttling back and forth, it's not that big a deal these days going to Kyiv. What's the mindset right now in the capital?
Well, the mindset is it's almost normal mean, almost being, well, you're constantly aware there's a war, and these siren alerts constantly remind you that there's a war. But over 2/3 of the capital's inhabitants are there. They're trying to live roughly normally, because you still have the curfews, you still have just a constant reminder of the war. It's a sort of a parallel reality.
You're going to host
really.
Eurovision?
We hope in Yalta, maybe. Who knows?
But I heard today, wasn't it the decision today not to do it in Ukraine? They will do it in the UK.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got, 10 more months to argue that one. Many thanks, Alexander Geary. I want to thank as well Craig Kapitas, Matthias Krupa, Elena Voloshin. Thank you for being with us here in The World This Week.